extended to
See, I
one
don't
group
think
of
so.
people
I don't believe
versus
that.
all.
That's okay, ma'am. That's okay that you
Yeah.
don't have to.
That's what we,
There
that's
are
why we're
times
here for the
when
conversation.
and we
So,
prefer to
I appreciate it,
stay
thank
with
you.
the
I've taken enough time, thank you.
And I appreciate it, and I
Yep.
appreciate your concerns. I think, to answer just quickly, I think there's a big federal conversation to have there about immigration and border security that we can't dive into. And this is a very, I can assure you of this is a very small population of the undocumented folks that are accessing driver privilege cards. So even if we had that information out there, you wouldn't have what you wouldn't have what you're seeking, which is identifying who's here and who they are and if they're
I just want
documented.
ratio.
No, I understand, but it's a very small, and I'll make
I don't know
one
how
last
very
point
small.
before we.
Obviously you know the information.
He knows it.
So,
And
Yeah, you know that information, right?
He knows it.
It doesn't matter.
You're basically declaring you know.
so, no, but I was addressing a specific part of the conversation, which was about how do we know who's here?
Right.
This small portion of the population that's undocumented is not going to give us more information on how we know is here. That's actually a federal issue in regard to secure borders and immigration policy.
My license says not for federal identification.
Yeah, so, and as I said earlier,
That's not
right,
an issue, it's a Rhode Island related issue.
and as I said earlier, that would require legislative change to the driver privilege code, so that it would change the look of that. So, we had a question back here.
Sure. I follow with what Rob Morgan said. An individual walks in to the Board of Canvassers, provides the information, they put into the system. At some point, the flag gets hit, gets up to your office. Now, the person's a registered voter, okay? Gets up to your office to take him off the count. But one of your people's having a bad day, and that person didn't come home.
Well, we would actually turn that
So what
over,
would happen?
we would actually turn that over to
What's the checks and balances? for that?
we would actually turn that over to the Attorney General, because the person would have checked off that they are a citizen. And that in and of itself is committing a crime.
So it's a two-step process?
Yeah, well, that's,
Number one,
the cross-check would do that, and then we would turn that person over to the Attorney General.
okay, so again, we have voter rolls, we have access to the voter rolls. Number one, your person, so everything right now is in your office, or Rob's office, whoever does the checks and balances. Comes in, that one person who's responsible that day to take that data and correct the system and forward to the AG has a bad day. And that 1, 2, or 3 people who came in
Yep.
didn't get flagged. What's the checks and balance? What is your office, the two offices, doing
So,
to provide that checks and balance?
so what we can tell you is that can happen, right? There's a human nature to all of this.
Yes, there is.
Human beings are running these processes.
Everybody makes mistakes.
But there is a post-election audit as well. And that's how the multiple voters were prosecuted after 2020 when they voted in both Florida and Rhode Island. So that, it's a back-end process. It would not happen prior to someone actually voting in an election. It is a back-end process to try to.
So they would be able to vote, and hopefully after the fact, we would catch.
That's the process that's in place. Yes?
So I actually just have a clarifying question going all the way back to Senator Rogers' original question about these licenses. So we have two things at the DMV, right? You go into the DMV to get your license, and if you are a citizen of the United States, you are offered the opportunity to register to vote right there at the DMV.
Right.
If you're not a citizen of the United States, you are not offered that opportunity.
Right.
Is that correct?
Right.
It's an opt-out.
It's
an
an
opt-out.
opt-out.
Yes.
But hold,
Other-
before
okay,
you
no,
go, so,
please.
but if you don't provide the documentation, you're not, when you go to the keypad to sign, you're not asked the voting questions.
You would
What
never
is the
get to that.
documentation?
I'm sorry?
What's the documentation?
You have to provide, the DMV provides it on the L1 form. It's a whole list of things that you can provide, a birth certificate, what have you. But in order to prove citizenship, you've got to provide certain documentation as listed by the DMV.
And that gets reviewed by the DMV staff
Correct,
for accuracy and authenticity.
correct.
And then if they find it to be accurate and authentic, and you choose to opt in to get registered to vote,
No, you have to opt out.
So
you're
you're talking about-
automatically gonna get registered to vote.
Unless you opt out.
If the staff person at the DMV believes you're a citizen, you're gonna get
Correct.
automatically registered to
I
vote.
got it, yes.
Other than that distinction, are there any other distinctions in the process between getting a license as a citizen and getting a driver privilege card as a non-citizen, all the way from entering the DMV through what your card looks like and what happens to your information? What are the differences and what's the same?
I don't feel strong enough on the DMV processes. All I can tell you is that the DMV is required to review the documentation and determine based off that documentation whether or not a person's gonna get a license, a permit, a driver's privilege card. All of that is determined by the DMV based on the documentation provided by the individual.
Good, and then that person, if they're determined to be a citizen, they're automatically registered to vote as an independent.
Unless they
Unless they
not
opt
choose to.
out.
Right.
And then once they get the license or the driver card, right, the driver privilege card, what are the differences between the license of a citizen and the license and the driver privilege card? Nothing in box. So the only difference here is the most important difference, which is whether you're gonna accidentally get registered to vote or not.
And the DMV.
Everything else is
Per-
the same.
per-
So
per
there's
an
really
APRA
not a lot of room for error.
Per
we feel.
an APRA, the DMV said there are no other systems in place other than the
Right.
fact that they're not legally allowed to vote.
And no one at the
So-
DMV is an elected official.
Right.
What's the training and certification for the staffers that are making these determinations?
Mhm.
Yeah, are they
Yeah,
federal?
accuracy of it.
Are they federal?
I feel like the DMV, somebody from the DMV should be here.
Yes.
Yeah.
And as a Secretary of State, you should have, you have
Just
jurisdiction over the DMV.
So we do not have
You do
jurisdiction.
not, it's the
No.
governor.
Who does?
The governor does.
Really?
Who does?
The governor.
Yes, Senator.
Secretary, so right now we have 5 out of 8 legislators here that represent Coventry. There's 5 of us out of the 8.
Okay.
I'm glad we're here to listen to exactly what you say. And talking to my colleague, we're on the Senate side, we also have 3 House members here. We are gonna look into exactly what you just brought up.
Distinct
Working-
difference between the two licenses.
Right, and working with the Secretary of State to try to alleviate all these issues. I think they're very important, that's why we're here. And the Secretary, also, the other issue I wanna bring up is, the same problem is also for deceased, those that are deceased to be taken off the voter roll. So I think we're doing a good job on that issue right there. And also to work with us and give us the numbers of how many have applied for both those privilege cards, whether it's the driver's license or the identification card, so we can get a number working with you, the DMV.
The DMV is supposed to report that to you, and I think that's January 1st.
Okay.
So you're gonna, the legislature has a
And we're
report
gonna
coming.
question it and work with you.
Yeah.
You said it's a small number, what is a small number though?
We'll find out January,
Yeah.
that's gonna bring,
They
that's
have to,
gonna
they have
raise
to
some red
continuously
flags.
report to you, how many people have.
And we wanna get that
Applied.
disaffiliation issue done as soon as possible, hopefully January, so folks that aren't gonna vote, probably the first primary is gonna be the presidential, then the others, to make it a lot easier, because I think a lot of folks do
And
want
to
that.
your previous point, Rob can go through or Kathy can go through the process of removing someone who's deceased from the voter rolls. If you wanna talk about the daily information that we get.
Yeah, so each, for the deceased voters, there are a number of ways that we make sure that deceased voters are taken off the voter rolls. First and foremost, we get a weekly report through our voter registration system from the State Department of Health. And they give us a list of people who have passed away, and generally, they're about 2 months behind. So if someone passes away, let's say today, we'll probably get that name in January. That information is matched up to the voter registration system and sent through the voter registration system right to the cities and towns. And every day that Lori logs into the voter registration system, she sees a list of people in the town of Coventry that have passed away, and she will remove those voters from the voter rolls. We also, due to our involvement with the Electronic Registration Information Center, which is ERIC for short, we get a list every 60 days from ERIC when they take our voter file and match it up with the National Social Security Death Master File. So we get that list every 60 days, and we take that information of people who have been deceased all over the country. And it's really important to note that, because sometimes Rhode Island residents may go to Massachusetts and live with a family member and pass away across the border, or they move to Florida and live with a parent or a child, and they unfortunately pass away in Florida. We now will get that information for anyone who passes away across the country, and our cities and towns will take those names and they will remove them from the voter list. Also, cities and towns, to Senator Rogers' point, many of the boards of canvassers know a lot of people in their towns, and it's not just small towns, but even in big towns. Boards of canvassers know a lot of people. They monitor the obituaries, and people will, cities and towns will update the voter rolls as people pass away. So when we, just as a quick anecdotal point, When we first joined Eric in 2015, it was the first time we had joined, and it was the first time our voter list was matched up against the National Social Security Death Master File, and we removed 1,500 people. 1,500 were on our voter rolls in 2015 that had been passed away. I believe, according to our last Eric report, which came earlier last week, I think we had 40 folks on our voter rolls that had passed away, and those 40 folks all passed away since the last time we got our Eric data. So the state, with the help of the Department of Health and the help of the National Social Security Death Master File, have done wonders for our voter rolls to remove people who have passed away.
And also, vital statistics, that from the city and town provide lists weekly to the board of canvassers of deaths. And that's another way of removing voters.
In every 2 years, we should try to maybe close that window, make it maybe 3 to 4 weeks, especially during the election period, every 2 years when the major elections are up, because I think it's very important. 2 months is a little bit of a long time, but again, whatever tools we can give you, pass legislatively, make your job simpler, would be glad to help you out.
One of the other things that we're talking about is to continue to periodically send out official elections mail so that we can get those returned from folks who are gone and then put them on the inactive list. And again, that there's a cost related to that. But I think that's worthwhile. There was a question here, yes.
Okay, so, a couple questions. So, the central voter, excuse me, central voter registration system that we have, okay. What are the sources of information that go through that and then to the cities and towns? I know there's the DMV, I know there's the Department of Vital Statistics, and the National Change of Address. Is there any other source of information regarding any changes in the stats of a registered voter?
Yes.
That you can think
Department
of?
of Corrections.
Oh, Department of Corrections, okay.
Jury
All right.
commission,
So, I'm sorry?
the jury commission,
Yeah, the cities and towns also get, when the jury
Yeah.
sends out their notices for jury duty, any undeliverable mail that's
Right.
returned to the jury.
Okay.
And that's not done through the voter registration system per se, it's done, the towns will get.
Directly to the town.
Correct, and they'll get like a paper, right? Lori,
Yeah, we get
paper
a-
copy, not
yes.
through the voter registration system.
from the jury
Okay, so there
commission.
might be, like, for example, that's the one probably I'm a little more concerned about, the national change of address. So there are a lot of people, I think, from what I understand, that really don't, like, bother to officially, go to the post office and officially change their address. So those people, in my mind, may be slipping through the cracks. So they might be living in Connecticut, but they're still here, and, who knows what can happen from there. They vote out of their parents' house or whatever, that type of thing.
Which is illegal. But yes, so to the national change of address piece, we get, the Let Rhode Island Vote Act that passed in 2022 requires our office to conduct national change of address 4 times a year. It used to be every other year, so the General Assembly requires us now to do it more often, which is great. The other way that we get data for people who have moved and maybe didn't go to the post office is we get, with Eric, every 60 days, we get a list of people who have a newer address with the DMV than they do with the voter registration system. So people are more likely, when they move to Rhode Island, the first thing they want to do is get their license. The last thing they think about is voting until it's time to vote. So we take that data every 60 days and we will reach out to a voter at their new address from the DMV and say, it looks like you've updated, it looks like you've moved, but you are still registered at your old address. Here's our voter registration, online voter registration website. Go on and update your information. We do that multiple times throughout the year, and then we do it one more time before, about a month before the voter registration deadline for a general election. So for the folks who don't update their address through the post office, we try to catch them through another means.
Yeah. Okay.
And then whenever I am speaking in a public forum, or we ask people to go onto our website, check your voter information system,
Yeah.
make sure it's accurate.
Yeah. So I hate to rehash the license thing again, but I'm a little confused because mine does say not for federal ID, and I realize, okay, that's not a real ID, okay? I opted not to get the real ID the last time, so that's fine. But then I had a conversation with my town clerk, and I was, I'm friendly with her, and I was talking with her and this and that. So she did a little bit of searching for me,